And now I'm pleased this morning to introduce to you a brother beloved as our speaker, Brother Hardy Steinberg. It's always a joy for me to hear Brother Steinberg. He always has a message that blesses the hearts of those that hear. Brother Steinberg, God bless you as you come and minister to us this morning.
Brother Hudson. Thank you. This morning I'd like to call your attention to Luke, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. And the thought I would like to share with you is this: does Jesus care when I've tried and failed? I think we're all familiar with the story of Peter's fishing expedition. And this makes a wonderful story that encourages all of us in the days in which we're living. Lou Gehrig was one of the great baseball players, I suppose almost in the same class as Babe Ruth. They say he played more than 2,100 games consecutively. He played in 7 World Series, and his batting average for the 7 World Series was .361. And yet, in spite of all his accomplishments, Lou Gehrig was known more, I think, as a gentleman than he was as a ball. The Yankee Stadium was a place of excitement as Lou Gehrig came to bat. The count went up to 2 and 3, and then the crowd almost became hysterical. And they thought surely Lou Gehrig, who had brought in many a run, would do so again. But the pitcher very deliberately threw a ball. It caught the outside corner of the plate, and the umpire yelled, "Strike 3." Gehrig didn't even swing at the ball. He stood there for a moment, and then he turned around and he looked at the umpire and said a few words to him. No one had ever seen Lou Gehrig argue with an umpire before. And when the news reporters there saw him talking to the umpire, they came down just as quickly as they could after the game was over. And they had one question that all of them were asking: "What did Lou Gehrig say to you, Mr. Umpire?" And the umpire finally beckoned Lou over. He said, "Lou, come over here." He said, "These boys want me to tell them what you said to me." He said, "Tell them." And then Lou Gehrig, he was kind of bewildered by all the excitement. He said, "Mr. Ump, I only said I would give $10 if I could have that one pitch back again." And I think most of us have times in our experiences when we feel that if we could have only one opportunity over again, if we could just have another pitch over again, we could do a little bit better. There's something about failures, whether they're small failures or big failures, they all affect us in one way or another. Small failures give us embarrassment. They result in our discomfort. And big failures oftentimes lead to discouragement and despair. But there's good news. There's good news even for us when we have tried and failed. I can't think of a better story than the one we have in Luke, the 5th chapter, to give us a great deal of encouragement here when we have honestly made an effort and haven't succeeded. The first lesson I think that we can learn here is that even great people fail. Even great people fail. On one occasion, you'll remember, Jesus borrowed Peter's boat. He pushed it out, asked Peter to push it out from the shore a little bit. He sat in it and he taught the multitudes. And Peter and his partners apparently were taking care of their nets, washing them, getting them ready for another fishing expedition. And then when Jesus had finished his teaching ministry, he turned to Peter and he said, "Peter, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draft." And it was at this point that Peter confessed utter failure. He said, "Master, we've toiled all the night, and we haven't taken a thing. We've tried, and we just haven't succeeded." Now, Simon wasn't a weekend fisherman who went to a stock pond to do his fishing. Peter was a professional fisherman. He made his living at it. And apparently, as a rule, Peter was very, very successful at his fishing. But this night, he had tried and he had failed. And sometimes we get the feeling that it's just ordinary people who at times are unsuccessful. It's just ordinary people who have failures. But when we look into history, we'll find that there are even 10 talent people who are unsuccessful at times. In fact, when we fail now and then, we're in the company of some of the greatest people that ever walked the face of the earth. Moses tried to deliver the children of Israel, and he failed. Joshua and Caleb tried to persuade the children of Israel to enter Canaan, and they failed. David tried to bring the ark to Jerusalem, and he failed. John Mark tried to become a preacher, and he failed so grievously that the Apostle Paul wouldn't even take him on another missionary journey. It doesn't make any difference what realm it's in. Sometimes it's in the work of the Lord that we fail. My goodness, I can think of a dozen sermons I'd like to call back and try over again. It could be in a Sunday school class that we tried and failed. It could be in our occupation that we've tried and failed. It could be in a personal project that we've tried and failed. Whether it's in the religious world or whether it's otherwise, people who have made great accomplishments are also people who have not succeeded at times, who have failed. But I think a second great lesson that we can learn from the story of the fisherman is this, that at this point, if we have a failure, it's very, very important that we choose the right advice. That we choose the right advice. After Peter confessed his failure, he was in the position of accepting the advice either of his partners or of the Lord Jesus Christ. He could have listened to the pessimistic crowd of his fellow fishermen who would have urged him to give up. It's no use, Peter. We've tried everything. It's time to quit. I know when I've bombed out, there's no use going on. Let's not give it another try. And listening to pessimists when we have tried and failed is one of the best ways to become a non-achiever. The children of Israel listened to the 10 negative voices at Kadesh Barnea, and the only monument they left to posterity was bleached bones out in the wilderness. They listened to the wrong crowd, and they went on in their failure. But instead of listening to the pessimists, Peter listened to Jesus, and he discovered that Jesus has the right message for people when they have tried and when they have failed. It all boiled down to these few words. Jesus said, Peter, try it one more time. Try it one more time. And Peter did. He said, Lord, at your word, I will let down the net, and we'll go out and give it one more try. I think the lesson here for us is very, very clear. The voice we listen to, if we have tried and failed, oftentimes determines whether we will be quitters or whether we will be achievers. There will be times in almost everyone's life when you feel you never want to try again, not ever again. Joe Louis wrote an interesting autobiography. It's entitled Joe Louis, My Life. And in this book, he tells about an episode in 1951 when Rocky Marciano defeated him, and defeated him very decisively. After the fight, the doctor of the State Athletic Commission came back and examined him, and he said, Joe, you can't fight again for at least 3 months. And Joe Louis wasn't in the best frame of mind at this time, and he kind of moaned out. He said, do you mind if I don't fight no more at all? When you feel like giving up, it's more important than ever to listen to the right voice. The counsel of others, even our best friends, can either make us or break us. You'll remember that after Naomi had been in Moab for a difficult time, eventually she decided to return, and then she called her two daughters-in-law together and gave them some advice and said, "Stay here. There's no use you're going with me." Orpah listened to this loving, well-intentioned advice. She went back, and she went back into oblivion. But Ruth listened to the same loving, well-intentioned advice. She disregarded it, and she went to Bethlehem and went on to the greatest life that a person in the Old Testament could possibly have enjoyed. And so when we've tried and failed, it's important to listen to the right advice. The third lesson I think we get out of this story is that great success can follow failures. When Peter obeyed the Lord, he discovered that success was waiting for him. He caught so many fish that his net was breaking. He called for his partners to come and help him, and they loaded their ships, and they had so many fish, both ships were in danger of sinking. I have often thought, if Peter would have given up, he would have missed one of the most thrilling experiences of his whole lifetime as far as his fishing career is concerned. Many people have found that by trying just one more time, they are able to turn failure into success. If Moses would have quit, he wouldn't have been anything but a mummy in Egypt. But he tried again, and he became a hero of the faith. If Joshua and Caleb would have given up, they would have become nothing but the victims of the wilderness. But they tried again, and they went on to enter into the promised land. If David had given up, there might never have been the city of Jerusalem. But he tried again, and he established a monumental location for the glory of God. And if John Mark would have quit after his ventures with Paul and Barnabas, we might never have heard of him again. But he tried again, and he became the writer of the gospel that bears his name. We might sing that song, "Does Jesus care when I've tried and failed?" Oh, yes, he cares. I know he cares. His heart is touched with my grief. The only people who don't make mistakes are the people who don't do anything else. Mrs. Walliger typed up these notes for me last week, and I noticed penciled in here, she said, "or people in the graveyard." And that's her part of the message this morning. The next time you try and fail, you honestly try to do something worthwhile and you fail, maybe we can learn a lesson from Roberta Rennie Lash. She was trying to learn to ice skate. She fell many times, so often that it finally seemed impossible for her to get up just one more time. And then someone called out to her, "Get up on your knees first." Roberta tried it, and it worked. And it will work for you and me too.